One of the most important topics that your family should sit down and make a plan regarding is food preservation. What is the plan? What is the timeline that you're preparing for? Where are you going to store that food? How are you going to preserve that food? Are you going to buy it already finished? Are you going to do it yourselves? Are you going to grow your own food? What is the plan? It's very important to come up with a plan, even if you're single, living in an apartment in New York City. I want you to think about this very carefully and write down what is the plan that you have for the future. Now, today I want to talk to you about what I believe is one of the best kept secrets in food preservation. Really, this has not been a topic that has been considered very much until just recently, when we have a tidal wave of people asking questions about freeze drying food. So that's what we're going to talk about here in this episode today in more detail. But let me just whet your appetite for this topic in the first place if you haven't even given it a thought. So you know that there are multiple ways to preserve food. We've talked about and we'll cover in detail, even in more episodes to come, about learning how to ferment foods, which are so rich in good things that your body needs in the future, and those preserve for a long while. We've also talked about canning, and you can watch our episodes on canning. That is a fantastic way to preserve foods. Considering that you have to have plenty of room to store those cans, you also would want to have shelves that can hold the weight. There's lots to consider. I won't cover them all, but there are pros and cons to all of the different things, but canning is one way to preserve food. Another way is dehydrating, and we've talked about that a little bit before. We've got a couple of episodes on that we'll have linked above and below this video. That is a fantastic way to preserve food for the next, I'd say, 3 years. So if your plan is for 3 years of preserved food, most dehydrated foods that you're able to put through that processing is going to be able to last you between 1 to 3 years without any issues, if you store them correctly. All of this is if you store it correctly, no matter which way you preserve your food. Now I want us to talk about freeze drying though as an option. Freeze drying is different in that where dehydrating, which can even be done outside in the sunlight in a dry climate, dehydrating just takes about 95% of the moisture out of that food by shriveling it up in the heat and the wind. So all you kind of need is a low amount of heat and a little bit of wind blowing across it without a lot of humidity in the air, and you can dehydrate your food. That's fantastic. It's also able to be done without any electricity in the event of a grid down situation, so that's in its favor. Freeze drying is an altogether different process where it takes the food clear down to far below zero, maybe as much as 30 or 40 degrees below zero in Fahrenheit, and then it raises the temperature so much so and so quickly that the ice doesn't even turn back into water. It just simply turns from ice to evaporation and is wicked out of the food. And what that does is it leaves the food with 99 to 100% less moisture than it started with, and retains about 90% or more of the nutrition that the food had. That's pretty incredible. Freeze drying will require electricity. It doesn't matter who you talk to who has made their own freeze drying apparatus from scratch. There's no way to get around the fact that you kind of need electricity. Even if you think, oh, I'm doing it with dry ice. Well, you're still going to need electricity to make the dry ice to use in your non-electric freeze dryer. It's just one way or another, this is something that has to be thought of and used up front before a crisis where you might not have electricity to work with. There are other pros and cons that we're going to cover in this and future episodes, so I can't cover them all right now in this one little moment. But let me talk you through a few of the pros that I think, hey, these are really valid things to consider. First of all, if you go to any sporting goods store, if you happen to be a hiker or camper or backpacker or such, you're going to notice there are myriads of brands out there now of freeze-dried food because it's so light. What it does is it retains all of the stability of the food itself. It kind of stays in the exact shape that it was. Sometimes it's a little bit smaller, and surprisingly, sometimes a little bit larger in mass, but it's almost weightless. I mean, it's crazy how light it is once you remove all of the water from it. And it retains its nutrients, which is fantastic. Once you add water to it, generally warm water later, it reconstitutes to as close to as you're going to get to the correct texture and feel and taste that it had originally. Also, it lasts whether it's in hot or cold environment, and it can last, if stored correctly, up to 30 years. The other day I went into Dick's Sporting Goods and noticed they had freeze-dried breakfast, and one was an omelet that had little bits of onion and green bell peppers and several different little things in it. A wonderful omelet that you could take camping and rehydrate with water. Guess how much that one little omelet cost? $12. $12 for one entree for one meal going camping. Now, times that times enough meals for a year for one person, and it's just astronomical. We're talking over $5,000 to buy enough food for one adult human on freeze-dried, pre-packaged, pre-bought food. That's just not even an option really for most of us. Here's another example. You can go to many grocery stores that are now carrying freeze-dried food and buy one of those, what they call number 10 cans. And it's a metal can. They call it number 10 for some reason, I don't know, but it's referencing a 1 gallon of freeze-dried food. Do you know right now 1 gallon of freeze-dried ground beef or meat, which is fantastic to get freeze-dried, is going to cost you between $80 and $100 for that 1 gallon of freeze-dried meat. It's incredible. I want you to have other options. And so, even though it's a very expensive personal option to purchase your own food freeze dryer, I'm wanting you to do the math and recognize, hey, this makes so much more sense than it ever has before, and it may be something your family might want to consider. Now, for this whole setup that I've got a medium-sized freeze dryer, and you can get ones that are larger and smaller, so you can budget accordingly. I have the medium-sized, and for this, I'm going to need a very heavy table. I could make one of my own and save money. I didn't have that option, so I had to buy one. So that could save you money if you don't need to buy a table that can hold at least about 300 pounds on top of it. You're going to want some method to store the food, so either Mylar bags with a sealer that can seal those Mylar bags and some oxygen absorbers. You'll want that method. Or you notice that I love using my canning jars for this. You could go that route, but you'll also still need those oxygen absorbers. Or you can also use that brake bleeder that sucks out all the oxygen that way as well. Think through what you're going to need, but all in all, for this that I have, I would say the budget needs to be $3,000. I know that's a lot. Sounds like the price of a small car, but I think that once you recognize the price point of freeze-dried food and the value of it, you might find that it's worthwhile to consider. So, in a future episode, I want you to stay tuned because we're going to talk about how to earn that $3,000 pretty quick so you can afford a freeze dryer of your own. But let me talk you through a couple of other reasons why you might want to have one. First of all, when you're considering the cost of per meal freeze-dried food that's already pre-packaged, and like you know, there are so many companies out there that do it. Some have higher calorie count, some lower. Most of them have a lot of preservatives that are added to them, which I don't like. When I preserve my own food, I can do it with completely no preservatives added and still expect it to last that 30 years. That alone is worth a huge amount to me. If you love breaking down the numbers, to the extreme, where you even take into account how much electricity you're using and how much time it takes and all of that, what you're going to find is that for you to make your own freeze-dried food, even taking into account all of those factors, you're going to be able to make it for about 20% of the cost that it would be if you were to purchase that freeze-dried food from any company out there. That is pretty incredible. And better yet, if you can grow your own food in your garden, you're going to be able to make it as low as 5% of the cost to buy freeze-dried food. If you want to look into this further, those of you who are number geeks and just love digging into all the little factors, you can go to familycanning.com. I have no affiliation with them. I don't know who they are, but they have a wonderful website that is for those number people who like every single thing to be accounted for, even the size and the weight of the food that you put into the freeze dryer and whatnot. What I want you to consider most, though, is that within 6 months of you purchasing something this big, this freeze drying equipment, and start freeze drying your own food, you're going to be able to make your money back from that in the amount that you save. And going forward, it may be far more than that. That's just in today's current numbers. We're expecting food to get more expensive. We're expecting the packaging for food to get more expensive, and the supply chains may or may not hold up everywhere. I don't mean to in any way cause fear, but I want to encourage you to prepare now, as anyone who is wise will do. This is a fantastic way to prepare for the days to come that are immediate and as far out as 10, 20, and 30 years down the road, so that this is taken off your plate of one of the most difficult, dire things that you don't know how to prepare for in a crisis. If you've planned ahead, this will not even be an issue for you. I hope that you take the time to look into this. I've got several links down below this episode that are going to help you do more research. Harvest Right has told us that if you will buy through our affiliate link with them, because they have given me a special little affiliate link, it will help you support this channel just a little bit, and they guarantee that they'll give you the lowest price that is available anywhere on the internet through their website where it takes you. All right, I hope you take the time to share this with somebody you love. I hope you look into freeze drying for yourself and just do the math and see if it works out. This might be something worth budgeting for that could save your life and other people's lives in the days to come. Thank you so much for being with us. Until I see you again, would you go out and find somebody to be a blessing to today? Bye for now. Hey there. Before you go, I would love to share a quick word with you. This is something David wrote himself in Psalm 112, verses 1 and 2. It says this: "Praise the Lord. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who greatly delights in his commandments. His offspring will be mighty in the land, and the generations of the upright will be blessed." Now go spread the word.